Hi, everybody. I'm Paul Shrivastava. I'm the co-president of the Club of Rome. Just want to welcome you all to this very interesting conversation on Earth Overshoot Day. The Club of Rome is hosting this event to mark this very important annual milestone when we start consuming beyond what the Earth is able to produce. The Club of Rome has been warning about overshoot for 50 years now. Overshoot was the big theme of our very first Club of Rome report, The Limits to Growth. And that report pointed to the rising population and consumption and the need to manage economic growth to prevent ecological collapse. We have continued in the last 50 years to put out many other reports which are related topics, like Limits and Beyond in 1922 and Reinventing Prosperity in 2016, The Factor 4 in 1998. And more recently, in 2022, we published Earth for All, which takes this discussion of overconsumption and the need to control growth even further. Addressing overshoot is important, and we need to grapple with it holistically, including dealing with climate change and biodiversity loss and economic inequalities. It's a reminder for us that the Earth's capacity is finite and declining, and the Earth ecosystems and cycles are essential for human survival and disturbed by human activities. And also it points to a reminder that we need to start thinking about planetary scale management, managing Earth systems and Earth cycles. You're going to hear a lot from the panel today about the scientific and institutional and systemic changes that are needed. Mathis Wackernagel, who's sort of the founder of the eco footprint concept and the Earth Overshoot Day activities, is here with us. He's a member of the Club of Rome and a very well-known scientist. He will give us a scientific basis for this conversation. But we're also looking to your ideas for how we can reduce overshoot and move the world towards a more sustainable direction. So with that, let me hand it over to Mathis to perhaps introduce the topic and point us in the right direction. Mathis?
Yes, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, for having us here on to mark Earth Overshoot Day, and thank you, Silvia, for joining us from the southern part of the hemisphere, from the winter.
Yeah.
While we all three others we are feeling the heat in the summer. Giulia in Bologna. I'm here now in Chicago. Louis Kenji also wanted to join us, but for family reasons was not able to do it last minute. So we'll have a conversation among us four, looking at the world from different angles. Because in the end, like this conversation has been a old or long conversation. The whole reason we talk about sustainable development and not just about development, the sustainable really is a recognition that we are living on a too small planet, or that our appetite for everything has become a bit too large compared to the size of the planet. And that this is becoming the constraint around being able to move forward as humanity. And so how to deal with it. But to know exactly, like when we say, yeah, the planet is small compared to our appetite, how small is it? And that's how bookkeeping systems are becoming important. Like with money, we want to know how much do we earn, how much do we spend, you know. The same way it's useful to understand how much does the earth regenerate as compared to what we consume. And the regeneration is really the mother of all resources because it limits how much food there is, how much timber, how many fibers, but it also limits CO2 sequestration, which limits how much fossil fuel we can use because there's too much fossil fuel on the ground. So we can put more of our ecosystems towards CO2 conservation or absorption, but then there's less space available to produce carrots, etc. But even mining in some ways is limited through the regeneration because there's a lot of stuff underground, but how much energy do we have to concentrate and dig it up? So in some ways, the regeneration of the planet is the limiting factor. And so the planet really is like a big farm that has forests and pasture and cropland, etc., all these productive areas. And so we can calculate, and we do that every year. And now with York University, how much is the Earth regenerating or every country regenerating compared to what does it take to maintain ourselves for all the food we consume, for all the energy we use, for all the timber that we apply, etc. So we can make a balance. And with that balance, what it shows is that nowadays, and it has been increasing, but nowadays for 2025, the estimates are, and it's a bit extrapolated because not all the data is in. So the extrapolation for 2025 is that by July 24th, we have used as much, between January 1st and July 24th, we have used as much as Earth can renew in the entire year. So it's like if we had spent all our money by now. And then people say, why is there still beer in the fridge? And of course, there can be still beer in the fridge because we can overuse. We can live from depletion. And that's what's happening. That for the rest of the year, mathematically speaking, the world lives off depletion. So that's kind of the context. So that sounds like very ecological, very environmental. What does it have to do with us? And that's why we have this conversation here to think about, like, what does it mean for us? Because economically speaking, you would say overshoot is the biggest market failure. In the sense, like when you think of bakeries, if there are not enough bakers, bread gets expensive. Then more people start to become bakers, and then kind of the bread gets less expensive again. So the market kind of balances, how much bread we want and how much we have and how much it costs, etc. With resources, that doesn't seem to be the case. Like we are still subsidizing the overuse. We use so much and the market doesn't seem to react. So that's a market failure, and market failures hurt everyone in the end. And so what is the pain? The pain is that we'll have increasing costs for resources in the end, inevitably, as they become overused. In the end, like something is not, or disruption. So that plays out as inflation. It's going to be harder to fill the stores. Our economies that are not adjusted to overshoot will also be less valuable, which means less jobs. The stock value is less. So things get more expensive, and the asset value and the ability of the economy to operate will be less. So it will be kind of constrained from both sides. So that's kind of the context why overshoot is not just a theory. It's actually playing itself out through environmental issues. Most environmental issues are driven by this overuse, climate change, biodiversity loss, etc. But also it plays out economically. So for that, I just would like to open the conversation, and then we have a conversation about it from different perspectives. We all come from different life perspectives, different geographic perspectives. And then also you as viewers, you can send in questions through the Q&A button that you may find on your screen as well. Very interested to hear what you have to say. So I just would like to kind of start around by asking all my three other friends, saying, like, in 2-3 words, when you hear overshoot, what do you think? Maybe Silvia, because you're the poet. You have probably the most beautiful words here.
I apologize for being the poet because I can't I can't give my input, but from my humanistic and poetic perspective, and it is not. It is not something so little, because actually in literature, in philosophy, in art, we find the expression of what is going on in societies and individuals. So you tell me, what do I feel? Well, I feel that we are living in a wrong way, and that we are living disconnected, absolutely disconnected from the ecological reality of the planet. And of course, if it is the ecological reality of the planet, it it attains us because we are nature. And it sooner or later, it reaches to our daily reality. So what do I feel? I feel our failure, Mathis. I feel that as human beings, as societies, we failed and we keep on going failing. And mostly in a very, very dangerous characteristic of human being, either conscious or unconscious denial of reality. And we keep on denying it. I mean, not the scientists. I mean, not the technologists, not us, that we are all involved in this. But there is a disconnection, a discordance of knowledge, a discordance of awareness. And I think that is the point where we should try to see how we can link the different perspectives and the different necessities and the different ways of living of people. Yeah. Because one thing is the scientists and the technologists and those of the Club of Rome and other marvelous organizations that are aware of this. And the other side is the civil, the common people that are surviving and that needs to live today. And politicians and entrepreneurs, corporations with their short-term yields.
Yes.
So this is where I see the disconnection, and I think it is severe. It is becoming more and more severe because of our model, our systemic model of civilization, what we think it is, what we prioritize today.
And that's why we engage with through Club of Rome, like thinking about it as a whole. And I think that's why I'm also excited, like perhaps Giulia, exactly that's where you're focusing on, like with the young people already thinking, how do we engage around those topics? And like, so maybe Giulia, how do you engage on those topics with the younger generation?
Thank you, Mathis, for the question. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really feel honored to be with you now to speak about these topics. I making a step back about how do I feel. I mean, now I feel really moved, and because it's nice that you ask about how do we feel and not what do we think about the Overshoot Day, because I think that the emotional part, it's really important when we come to this kind of topics, as for the disconnection that Silvia was mentioning before. This is something that makes me profoundly sad and anxious and angry. And at the same time, if I have to say something about the concept of overshoot, at the same time, I'm kind of grateful because at least it's something that now is measurable, and you try, thanks to your work of Global Footprint Network, to unveil or the interconnection that are present that we are not able to see. And so at least we do have a tool in order to at least being aware of what is going on, and then try to start from that part to try to do something. And these emotions are really strictly connected with what you were asking about my job, because I am the president of a little but really deeply committed cooperative that is based in Italy, in Bologna. We deal a lot with European projects that have the aim to make their contribution for the ecological transition, trying to raise awareness, make capacity building activities and educational activities in schools, but also outside schools, so formal and non-formal education, in order to try to boost not only awareness, that is something that now we unfortunately have, because climate crisis and depletion of resources is something that is happening, but also to somehow spark creativity and action. So try to be positive and proactive, and try to understand how to deal with the mitigation and adaptation to climate crisis and make our best in order to make something. And I have to say that engaging youngsters is for sure something that is always super interesting and motivating, because of course they have an approach to life that is always able to teach you something. And in general, speaking about these topics, they are the generation that is most aware about what is going on. And what is lacking is not the awareness, but the capability to understand how to move forward. And in order to do this, we try to use innovative methodologies in schools and not, such as game-based learning. And this is why here I am right now to speak, to tell you something about this project that you see here, that is the Food Odyssey. That is an Erasmus Plus project in which we put together schools from 4 different countries, so Italy, Slovenia, Serbia, and Spain, and we try to bring into school the complex topic of climate crisis and the interconnection with food systems. And so food, because as we were saying before, Silvia, as this triple function of being the victim of climate crisis, because agriculture is one of the main victim of what is going on in terms of weather extreme event, and then floods and so on and so forth, but is also one of the perpetrator of the climate crisis, since is one of the main responsible for GHG emission. But at the same time, trying to be always a little bit optimistic is also could be the solution. And since food is something that people know pretty much well, we all eat, and it's a good tool not only to speak about what we can really do, but is also a way to make the transition more joyful, because food is linked with culture, conviviality, but also really taste. The connection that Silvia was mentioning before is something that really becomes part to us. So last but not the least, and then I will shut up because you make a question, I'm speaking a lot. I just wanted to say that within this project is really nice, because we are bringing together teachers, students, food advocates, organizations, in order to co-create all together an escape room that is a digital tool. So it's a digital escape room that is available online, open access for everyone. And the idea is to bring this tool in class in order to let the students play and learn by playing, bringing these these Ulisse around through different challenges that are or opportunities to speak about food system and daily choices that then they have to make in order to understand which is the impact of their choices on the system we live in. And yeah, this is only one of the projects, because then we try always to use comics, theater, a lot of different methodologies to try to involve students, but also at the same time sparking creativity and reconnecting them with interest to these complex and huge topics that are also tricky, because generate also anxiety.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more how the kids and students and young people react to these questions in some ways. But perhaps before, let's also have Paul give like his perspective. How, like, what does it trigger to you to hear overshoot? What kind of
Okay, yeah.
what feelings come up
I'm,
there?
I'm still digesting everything that Silvia and Giulia have discussed, and I agree that in some ways it makes me feel like Silvia, that we are living the wrong kind of life, and we are denying that. And not only are we denying it, but we are glorifying the kind of life that we live. I mean, we are living in what the world calls the consumer society, where consumer rights are protected. We are encouraged by businesses and by politicians and by the culture as a whole to consume more and to consume and earn more and to get more and to grow more and have bigger houses, bigger cars, bigger even jet planes if you can afford it. I just returned last weekend from Aspen, Colorado, which is only a few hours away. And on the tarmac, I noticed there were 50 jets, private jets that were parked for the weekend. So we are living in this very hugely consumerist culture. And not only we in the United States, but the rest of the world is trying to also follow in this path. And to me, overshoot is a consequence of this kind of mindless consumption. So if there was one word to describe overshoot for me, it would be mindless consumption. It is not consumption that brings us happiness. It is not consumption that is fair to even amongst our own neighborhoods and regions. Certainly, it is not fair on a global scale where some countries are consuming 10 times the eco footprint of others, or maybe even more. So I think we need to be thinking about what can be done systemically to change this. Yes, we should take personal responsibility and we should change our own behavior, of course. But I think the bigger changes will come when we put these economic systems on the right path, rather than from a consumerist orientation to some kind of a regenerative economy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Thank you.
That's wonderful. So where do you see the opportunities? I mean, we heard a bit from Giulia. I think also I was just recently in South America because on some level, because of this market failure, you can say on some it's this market failure is a cost to everyone, but then particularly those countries that provide the resources from which we depend on and for which are so scarce, they barely get an economic return. So maybe like addressing overshoot may also be a great opportunity for countries that have the resources to get, because they actually have, they provide so much to the world, they're not being compensated for it. But so where do you see opportunities for engaging? I mean, and Giulia, perhaps we want to start with the young people as well. With what are they excited about? Where they see opportunities? What do you see opportunities for them? But then also, obviously, for Paul and Silvia, where are the opportunities?
Well, where are the opportunities? Oh, well, you know that I confess that sometimes I feel helplessness. I feel that I am plunged into despair because, yes, absolutely what Giulia is telling us, and children and young people, they are a bit aware and they have more consciousness of what is going on than adults. Because adults, we are already caught by this systemic model, economic models. So I think that in South America, mostly, you know better than me, Mathis, that we are the great producers of food of the world, in the world, at least one of the most, the biggest producers. And so the point is that we are having a agricultural model that is extractive, and it continues. It is an extractive model of agricultural work that we inherited. It has been all way long in our history, and it persists. And it persists because we have an elite that wants to keep it ongoing. We are having landowners of thousands and thousands and thousands of hectares in Argentina that are doing extensive and intensive monoculture production. For example, the soybean that has ruined and devastated the soils. And they didn't mind because of that short term of an elite. So we are dependent, we depend on our, the rich world. We depend on Europe, we depend on the United States to buy all our production. And it goes against even our food security. Even against our food security for our society. So I see, I am confused, and I would like you to tell me more, because sometimes I get despair. You know, one more thing, it is not just the overuse, but it is always also the waste. You know that in Argentina, 40% of what is produced is wasted.
Wow.
40%. per year, per
Mm.
year. And I am so sorry to tell you that our government, it encourages the waste of food. It throws out food because we're so rich and we have such a capacity, and that this is the short term, and this is what education has, but not only education. I think that we should try to make research, dear Mathis, in what you are an expert, with sociologists, with social psychologists. Why? What happens with us? I am talking about Argentina. And one very important news, as you tell, the Earth Overshoot Day this year is the 24th July, isn't it?
Yes.
In Argentina, it is the 3rd of July. We have overused and we have exceeded our land's capacity to regenerate even earlier. Because of this, we waste our resources. We have no conscience because there is so much. And there is a denial. If you tell everybody, well, listen, oh, well, but you know, this happens today, it's another reality. And it is fostered and it is strengthened by the very government in Argentina. So what can we do? It's a question of philosophy to see how can we teach or exchange in ethics, in ethics, because the key factor is the human being. I think that I learned from you, Mathis, that the biocapacity is incredible of nature, of the earth, of the planet. And it is something very clearly shown during the COVID pandemic. We had to be closed in our houses, and the nature recreated itself. Even here in Argentina, I live 50 kilometers from Buenos Aires. During COVID, pumas reappeared.
Wow.
Pumas reappeared nearby. We were all here, and the police said, be careful because there are 2 pumas going all through, because they regenerated. So it was very dangerous. But at the same time, I said, oh, nature is so marvelous. So the problem is us.
So yeah, the power of nature, huh? The power of nature if we let it
Oh,
thrive.
yes. Yes.
And Giulia, so
I do agree with Silvia with everything, but at the same time, I mean, the problem is us, and that's 100% sure since we are living Anthropocene. So, I mean, it's clearly like this. So I totally agree with you, and I feel also powerless a lot of time. But if I have to reply to the provocative and positive question of Mathis, where there is the opportunity, I mean, I think that thanks God, there are in any case tons of opportunities, in the sense that it's true that we are far, far, far from really not understanding but taking action in the right direction. But if we think about when the Limits to Growth was published, and so 50 years ago, I have a double reaction. So in one way, I said, okay, come on, guys, we knew everything. And so why we miss so much time? I mean, every second counts. And instead we are still here always speaking about things that seem so disruptive, but they are so old school somehow. So speaking about sustainable development yet seems something super new, but I mean, it should be like our oxygen. At the same time, if we go back, and I mean, a lot of things went on, and in a way, we understood a lot of things for suffering rather than for intelligence, because climate change is happening and is completely destroying our daily life. And so now we cannot denial, even if there is a general denial from a political point of view, people know that this is real, and so and they perceive it. And I mean, the opportunity, I see the fact that now there is like a convergence of a lot of fights. So nowadays we speak more about crisis. And so it's not only about climate change, but is climate crisis that puts together all the other transversal fights. And I think that the situation is so hard that depression is really high. And so I really believe in the consciousness of the people and of the critical thinking of people that organize themselves in order to ask to politicians something. So I think that, I mean, there is this kind of rebirth of awareness also for social rights. I mean, we are looking a lot of disaster. What is happening in Gaza is strictly interconnected also with the system that we are creating. So everything is interconnected. I'm not saying nothing new, because what was Aurelio Peccei was saying in 70s, thinking globally, acting locally. So it's nothing new. But nowadays, at least there is a platform and an humus in which it's possible to speak this language. And so not to seem aliens, but to try really to make our contribution. And I think that as long as we are here and there are these kind of occasion like today, I mean, at least we have a meaning for living right now, and we know which is the right part of the world from which we need to stand and defend our possibility. And young generation are with us, even if there is a huge problem of intergenerationality. So, I mean, the dialogue between us or also the generation before me and youngsters is not so easy, because responsibilities that adults have are not so easy to see and to accept. So, I mean, for sure, it's a big challenge, but I think that there is the possibility to channel this anger that is rapidly increasing in order to go in the same direction. We know everything. We have the tools. We have the knowledge. So we don't just have to stand on, I mean, and believe in that, because otherwise, why to be here right now? So
Excellent. I think to me, one underappreciated opportunity is that because overshoot persists, the future actually is much more predictable than it ever was. You know, we know that people want to eat and sleep, and that we always knew that. And we also know now that the future will be far more determined by climate change and resource constraints. And so that gives us insights. I mean, I think there's no downside from better understanding the future, because you can make better decisions. So as an opportunity, I think so often how we then retell the stories rather than saying what's sustainable, we say, given that this future is going to come towards us probably faster than we would expect, what's going to be valuable in that future? So it's really kind of saying like, why would you not put your energy into things that will be more valuable for you, but also for society? Because value means you build things that will be able to operate in that future. So like a food system that can feed us, or housing that will be able to work because it's not so energy intensive and doesn't take so much transportation, etc. So I think to me, the opportunity to kind of frame it a little bit more and just ask then, okay, if that's so, overshoot is not the burden, it's just the context in which we live. What will become valuable in that future, and what do we need to put our energy into so we can operate? And then like it gives us actually, it makes us each stronger in choosing things that will be helpful for us, but also for everybody around us in some ways. So anyhow, that's got a more business way of framing. I don't know how that resonates with you, Paul, but on some level, I think we underappreciate how aligned the incentives really are. Like we live in this storyline of saying, oh yeah, it would be a good thing to do, but why me? But actually, you don't get ready for this. I mean, if you wait for others, you're hurting yourself. That's kind of my sense. I don't know what you think, Paul.
Yeah, no, I think when you talk about opportunity, you got to be a little more specific to say opportunity for whom.
Yeah.
because what might be an opportunity for one is a threat for another.
Yes, yes.
So
Yes.
let's talk about opportunities for, I'd like to spend maybe a minute talking about opportunities for governments, opportunities for businesses, and opportunities for young people to live their lives. On the government side, I see that Overshoot is pointing to an opportunity for rectifying what has been a historical injustice of colonialism. That the
Good.
South, we took all the ecological resources of the South and we developed the North. If these governments in the South really can value their resources and ecological services that they have to offer, I think there is an opportunity to correct the mistake and try to find ways in which less developed countries can rise higher on the value chain of production. Because right now, you take coffee or you take rubber or whatever, the rubber comes out there, but all the processing is done in industrial countries and all the money goes to the industrial countries. So that is a concrete opportunity for governments to rethink where they want to position their countries, how they want to revalue their resources, get the right prices for it, etc. And this
It's
can
a
be
really good point.
elaborated
Just
a lot.
to add to that, I mean, I think if you think of leverage, it's so weird on some level that those who actually are so dependent on these resources think they are the strong ones, and those who have the resources think they are the weak ones.
Yes.
I don't. I think it's more a cultural question than a market question. And you're pointing to a very interesting point, Paul. So sorry. So
Yeah.
that's the
So
government
the
side.
second opportunity I see is for businesses because businesses are sort of the instruments of wealth creation. And historically, businesses have not thought about ecological efficiencies because there was the surplus of materials and resources. We lived in an empty world. And now that we are living in a full world where resources have become scarce, so all the way from fossil fuels to mining to agricultural soil, etc. So what kind of business models are going to work in the future? This is not just an opportunity. This is a requirement for businesses to rethink their own business models so that they create more eco-sensitive products and they don't crash ecosystems on which their own businesses depend. So I see business opportunities. I see also opportunities for young people who, the ones that I interact with, many of them are rejecting the approach of the past where they go, like in the US, go to college, get 150,000, 200,000 loan, which sits on their backs, and then they have to work in high paying jobs. Many young people are kind of thinking about what might be other ways of creating a livelihood that is more regenerative, more connected to their community and their family, more satisfying and happy for themselves. And it doesn't require as much money. It, of course, requires some money, but they don't have to get on the treadmill and just live the kind of corporate lives that we have been forced or chosen to live in. So I think there's a real opportunity uh, for rethinking what it means to be human and learning new ways of being human that are different from this materialist, overshoot, consumerist example that we and our generation has set. I think it's a bad example, and I think there are good alternatives out there for young people.
Yeah, that's true. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree absolutely with Paul. What he is saying is really very important. And this is you know that here, you have been here, Mathis, several weeks ago in Argentina. Well, now they are saying in different places and ONGs, because all is about economy and about finances, no? So they are saying here, economy for people is so important that cannot be left in the hands of economists.
Yeah.
We need
That's a good way of saying it.
so we need We need humanism. That is why we are working in the Club of Rome, a new humanism. What does it mean? What Paul said. What does it mean to be human being today? And I have been 2 weeks ago with Cardinal Turkson at Vatican, and he said, well, we should be also working on social transformation. We need to work on a social transformation, because there is the problem that is so important, what Giulia is telling. And I want to take something that very interesting and poetic that Paul said, when he said, it is not just that we are practicing a consumption model, we are glorifying it. And this is very important. We are glorifying that model by the medias, the politicians, at least in Argentina. And let me tell you something. I come from philosophy. I can't forget something interesting that Giulia said. We are repeating and repeating what we already know. And you know that there is an anecdote from Socrates. In the 5th century, in Greece, he foresaw this. And once there is a story that says that he came back to his house. He had been at the market, and he says to his wife, Xantipa, oh, you know, Xantipa, I saw so many things in the market that I do not need. Isn't it beautiful? So many things. I go through the airports, and they are markets, and they are so, and I say, oh my God, Socrates, there are so many things that I do not need. But as Paul says, the medias, politicians, and others in business and businessmen, they make us think that we need that to be happy.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so many cultural factors as well, and and I think there's also mentioned on the questions, very interesting questions coming in. For example, I mean, and Snick just emphasized, and I'm paraphrasing here, like the contradiction between kind of the cultural model around money and the reality of ecosystems. Like money is infinite, and we are so focused on it, we think that's the ultimate thing, and we can multiply it more and more, while the earth is limited. And so there's like this contradiction between the money systems and kind of the focus and the glorification, as you said, about it, and the physical reality of limited ecosystems and planets, and how we deal with it. So it becomes very practical, like that money is driving things. And Paul mentioned earlier, before we actually had just before, as we prepared for the conversation, like the idealism of young people. And then in many places around the world, particularly in the United States, where they have to spend so much money on their education that they end up like educated, but with enormous debt. And then they are kind of beholden to the financial system and kind of have to sell out to their values in some ways to kind of pay back that debt. Or, I mean, debt in Argentina as a a limitation for what society can do, that has been limiting many countries being in too much debt. So the kind of this contradiction between financial realities that seem to be taken more real than the physical reality. Yeah? So it's part of the drivers. Yeah. And Giulia.
I have the feeling that, I mean, I could not agree more than on what you all said. But the thing is that the glorification of consumerism is the golden rule of capitalism. So somehow it's everything is perfectly working in a system that does not work. So the problem is that I really think that governments, but as well as businesses, if businesses somehow are, I think we lost Paul, but maybe we will reconnect. But if businesses somehow will be forced to change in order to respond to a demand of consumers that will change because youngsters are more aware, and so somehow they will feel forced. governments should do the same, but I mean, the problem is always the same problem of short-termism, and we are all in this big pool of a system that we really don't know how to rebuild, because we don't know from where to start. So it's I mean, the question of the questions. But at the same time, I mean, I think that also here there is the possibility to reshape a bit, also starting from new economists. If I have to think about Kate Raworth, and so the donut economics. So also from that side, we are so in a situation that it's so bad that some of great minds like yours and like some of economists that are outside there are trying to, I don't want to say to create an alternative to the capitalism, because as Fisher was saying, it will be more easy to think about the end of the world at the end of capitalism. But I mean, maybe we do have a possibility, because we will be forced, as Mathis was saying, in a way. And I really liked your approach, in the sense that now that it's more predictable, maybe we can shape it, even if I think that sometimes we should be more radical. And this is all the topic is there. We don't have the courage to be radical from a policy point of view and business point of view, and because there is this lack of will, and because it's hard, and at the same time, I think that maybe education can help to prepare the majority of people to be ready to be so radical. Because in European Union, I don't know if you know, but we have been super courageous at the beginning with our Green Deal policy, and now we are making step backs because people were not ready to accept the big changes. So is an ecological transition that is a transition, but we are losing time. So it's a transition that sometimes I think that we should speed up and with more courage, and going straight forward, giving more trust to people that know more. So the Club of Rome, Global Fruitful Network, we are, I mean, we are full of experts that can lead from a technical point of view.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here, Mathis.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, I'm sorry because my internet connection has been a little wonky. I got thrown out a couple of times, and I was just starting to look at the questions in the chat, and there are some really interesting questions by our audience, and I would recommend the other panelists might also take a look at them. But I want to say a couple of things. One is about the financialization of the economy and how it is distorting our understanding of the biological economy. We really need a completely new approach that if we are going to deal with overshoot in a serious way, which is about biocapacity, then we really need a bioeconomic theory to underlie it. Something that what financialization has done is it has completely disconnected our lives, our wealth, our financial understanding from what's happening on the ground. So when a government sets interest rates, it does not think about what will that interest rate do to water, or what it will do to land, or what it will do to deforestation. These are questions that central bankers don't even know how to conceptualize. So I think there is this disconnect between the real economy of Earth and how we human beings perceive wealth, which is mediated by this kind of financialization whose main logic is speculation. So all these values that we end up creating are pushed through a kind of risk management logic, which is, to me, a lot of it is speculative and based on partial knowledge. And we completely ignore the underlying biological economy.
It's so
are
interesting.
not going to avoid overshoot if we don't fix this. So I really want us to, and at the Club of Rome, we are attempting to rethink economic forms, and we're talking about this regenerative economy so that we can connect back to the biological economy and understand at least what the role of financialization should be. We are having projects on reframing finance in a way that on the one hand acknowledges the bioeconomy, but on the other hand also takes care of the injustices of global debt and other things that the colonial legacy I mentioned earlier has left behind. So there's a lot of work to do, but the positive and the good news is that I see this all as an opportunity for innovation of the mind, of what we are thinking, how we are thinking about the future economy, and an innovation in living for young people so that they don't have to just get back on the treadmill that we got on.
Yeah. And I think there's such simple things, even like what I often read in the media and even academic papers, and when we talk with people, people use the word rich and poor as a synonym for high income and low income, which is a total confusion, because rich actually is a wealth concept. And as we are running out not of money, but of biocapacity, those who are really rich are those who have biocapacity. So by using sloppily the words rich and poor and doing as if that meant money, we're kind of feeding into a misunderstanding of what actually is the key to the future. If we kind of took just one step back and say, actually, rich, like who is rich? Argentina is rich, in biocapacity. Brazil is rich. And Switzerland doesn't have that many resources. It has some other resources, but not so rich. High income, but not so rich in some way. So by decoupling that, maybe that opens some doors to kind of rethink where do we need to put our emphasis and what is the key to building our stable futures locally, in some ways.
Yeah. And I would just add to it that in addition to the rich versus poor, the notion of rich is not just a financial notion. We
Exactly.
need to make it beyond material rich, right? We could be spiritually rich, you could be emotionally rich, you could be rich in relationships. And we sort of just reduce everything down to a kind of,
Finance.
finance.
It's ridiculous. Billionaires in emotional richness.
Yeah, they could use some.
Yeah, yes. But we have the models that tell the huge society that they are rich and that we are poor. And there is a very interesting question there. I think I've seen. It is the rich people, and not the poor. I think. Well, here, overshoot more is the result of the rich instead of the poor. Well, the point is, I think that overshoot is it is produced by the greed of the rich, but also the poor. When they are in despair, they are part of the overshoot. Last time, in a very interesting meeting on climate change in Rome, somebody said, well, economists, of course, and businessmen, they say, well, we can help by planting 3 million trees. Well, 3 million trees. In Argentina, maybe you know, Mathis, that the Argentinian chapter has already planted since several years ago more than 1 million trees throughout Argentina, according to the different regions, because it is not a question of planting no matter what tree. But the point is that they are cut down by the rich, by the poor, because they need wood for cooking, they need wood for their homes, so they cut them. And I think, Mathis, you have been in IT, I think. Well, IT was a forest. And it has exhausted its lands by cutting down every single tree they found. Till the moment that today, Haitian people, they hate trees. So that is why we should work on humanism. We should work on the human beings, rich and poor, and that is education a factor. And I think sociology and social psychology, we need all that. We need all that.
That's interesting. Yeah. And and on the topic, there's just some from the questions coming in. Jan Juffermans mentions that there's a book called apparently Too Rich, or called Limitarianism, and by a Professor Ingrid Robaines. So there's lots of interesting new books coming out about that as well. Another question, just to be coming to the end of the session as well, it's kind of what and Snake mentions that, I mean, education may not be good enough because we're just reproducing the old beliefs. We need fresh insights. So how do we shift the educational system that our thinking becomes consistent with the challenges that we are facing? And maybe also that's, I mean, that's why I like, and why I'm so glad Giulia is here as well, kind of trying totally new ways of engaging on this topic, making it interesting, but also helping young people to feel in the driver's seat and seeing choices and opportunities. But I wonder, I mean, what are these hacks? What kind of are these hacks that we can help also the educational system become ready for the
I,
inevitable future of climate change and resource constraints? What are your last thoughts? And then we may have to roll up already. And thank also the many great questions that came in from the participants that we tried to weave into our conversation. And obviously, it's a big conversation that will not end so quickly as because Overshoot hasn't ended yet. But we're appreciative of all the great questions coming in. But so maybe Giulia, if you want to start, like, where do
yeah,
you see the
I will
possibilities for
try
kind of
to
programming the system?
more synthetic as possible. But I mean, first of all, ministerial programs are really that old school. So I mean, we should all rebuild the programs. At least I'm speaking about Southern Europe. Then I don't know, maybe there are some best practice around, and I would love to know more of them. But since our area is here, I know that the biggest problem is that we always speak about systemic thinking and trying to speak holistically, as Paul was saying at the beginning of the webinar. And this is something that we give it for granted, but we give it for granted. But at the level of school education, everything is in silos, separated one to each other. So also speaking about climate crisis is rather, I mean, is barely impossible because it's so transversal that there is no a subject that can envision all the complexity of the subject. So first of all, really to think about, rethink about subjects and not separating them one from each other. And then, of course, see sustainability not as a subject, but rather than a lens through which you have to look at everything. And so I think that there is really the need to rethink about educational system, at least from a high school level. Then university is slowly changing. And so a lot of times we are more used to see something that is updated to the challenges that we are living. But so changing programs and also the making training to the trainers that needs to be updated, because the teachers that we have nowadays did not have the possibility to study what we studied. So as Area Europa, with the project that we do, we really believe in the approach train the trainers. So with a cascade effect, we train the trainers, and then the long-lasting impact is more powerful because they can teach to more people. So that's my 50 cents for
very good sense. Maybe Sylvia and then Paul to how do we reprogram the system, the educational system?
Well, how we reprogram educational system. You know that here in Argentina, we are having a huge challenge in this moment because education is being canceled. I mean, national education is being canceled because according to this model, education is an individual question as health. So the state has nothing to do in that, according to our president. So this is a real challenge. I believe I follow what Giulia is saying. I find it, and sustainability, to understand that sustainability must be a key topic in education today. And it is transversal, it is holistic, and it also includes ethics.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
also includes values, to rethink values and life. What more value than life?
Yeah.
And to make it, and we must work emotionally as well. There is a philosopher in the United States that is with Paul's university, Martha Nussbaum, and she works from philosophy in the emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And we must consider that, because people, children, young people, they feel emotionally, and it is something good to make this challenge of the overshoot emotional, because not everybody can understand or is able to reach science.
That's why we started with how do you feel about overshoot? Because that's, I think, important to ground it. So now, Paul, your
Yeah,
last, we're
I'll
getting
be
to
brief.
the hour. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I know we are running out of time. So education. So I think and I'll talk in the context of higher education because I've been teaching at universities for
Yes.
40 years. And my sense is that universities, at least in the United States, are educating for jobs.
Exactly.
That has been their primary mission. And now we are living in a world where AI and robotics is going to probably replace upwards of 50% of jobs in the next 15 to 20 years. So that as a mission for university is a very dangerous ground. So I think universities should rethink. So what else could they be educating for? At the Club of Rome, we've been talking about education for hope, which is a way of thinking about the future with an empowered sense of design, that we can do things differently in the future. And it is our responsibility. And hope is not just a wish or an optimistic outlook. Hope is an act that we have to perform, and it can be performed through education. So what would it mean for current universities to move from education for jobs to education for hope? I don't think they can do that. I think we need new institutions. We need maybe new forms of learning to happen within the family, at childhood, and high school before they come to the university. Because by the time they come to the university, their values are frozen, their purpose is frozen. They are basically trying to get that little bit of an edge so that they can perform in the job market. So I think there's a big challenge. We've got a number of projects at the Club of Rome. There's one called Transforming Business Education, because we think that business education now is not only not delivering what it should, it is actually causing harm
Yeah.
by training people to go back and extract more out of nature and not thinking regeneratively. So big topic. We could have another webinar on
My
education
goodness,
alone.
yeah. What we see, overshoot touches everything.
Yeah.
What we are clear about at Global Footprint Network is that overshoot will end. That's not the question. The question is how it will end, whether it ends by design or by disaster. And I think also we should close this overshoot seminar by design, keeping to the time, and thanking so much you all from different angles of the world, bringing in your perspective and your passion and your insights, and the many very interesting questions that helped us kind of also guide the conversation live on here on Zoom. So thank you so much for participating. I hope somehow we can capture the question. Also, we probably in our next newsletter will kind of summarize kind of some of the ideas here and links to other organizations working in this space, just so you can find out more where to engage. And it takes us all. It's a big learning journey, and we don't have the answers yet, but some interesting questions. So thank you all for being here, and
You. Thank you
Thank
much.
you.
in
Yeah.
contact again. Let's hear
Yeah.
from each other.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.